Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The barrel of the gun was cold against his temple, but the nausea churning in his gut was far more violent than the fear of death. Julian gasped, his eyes flying open to a ceiling that was too high, too ornate, and far too white to belong to the hell he thought he died in. He sat up, the movement tearing a groan from his throat, and the world tilted on its axis, not because of the dizziness, but because of the heavy, alien weight pulling at his midsection. His hands flew down, trembling as they brushed against the silk of a hospital gown, landing on the impossible, firm swell of a stomach that had been flat when he went to sleep. Or, when he thought he went to sleep. Panic, sharp and blinding, clawed at his throat. He scrambled backward, hitting the padded headboard of the massive bed. This wasn't a hospital. The chandelier dripping crystal from the ceiling and the heavy velvet curtains blocking the city lights screamed of obscene wealth. He looked at his hands, calloused, scarred, familiar, and then back at the mound of his belly. He remembered the rain. He remembered the sound of a car flipping. He remembered blood. But he didn't remember this. "You're awake." The voice was low, a baritone rumble that vibrated through the floorboards and settled deep in Julian's bones. It triggered a primal instinct within him, half fight, half flight, and something else entirely that terrified him more than the first two. Julian snapped his head toward the shadows in the corner of the room. A man sat there in a high-backed leather armchair, nursing a tumbler of amber liquid. He was a masterpiece of danger, clad in a charcoal three-piece suit that fit his broad shoulders like a second skin. His hair was the color of raven feathers, swept back to reveal a face carved from marble and cruelty. But it was his eyes, predatory, molten gold, and terrifyingly possessive, that pinned Julian to the bed. "Who are you?" Julian's voice cracked, dry and unused. "Where am I?" The man stood up, the ice in his glass clinking, a sound loud as a gunshot in the silent room. He walked slowly toward the bed, moving with the lethal grace of a panther stalking a wounded gazelle. "The doctor said the amnesia might be a side effect of the coma," the man said, his voice devoid of warmth, yet laced with a simmering tension. He stopped at the foot of the bed, his gaze dropping to Julian's stomach before snapping back to his eyes. "But I didn't think you'd forget me, Julian. You can forget your name, your sins, even your God. But to forget the man who owns you. I'm not owned by anyone." Julian spat, the defiance instinctive, though his body trembled. He tried to slide his legs over the edge of the bed, but a wave of dizziness slammed him back down. The man was beside him in an instant. A large, warm hand clamped around Julian's jaw, not painfully, but with enough force to immobilize him. The man leaned in, his cologne, sandalwood, tobacco, and the metallic tang of blood, filling Julian's senses. "You are in the penthouse of the Vane Syndicate," the man whispered, his lips inches from Julian's ear. "I am Cassius Vane, and inside you, growing despite all the laws of nature and the chaos you caused, are my heirs. Two of them." Julian's breath hitched. Cassius Vane, the name floated in the fog of his memory, attached to a sense of overwhelming dread. The Vane Syndicate wasn't just a gang, they were the apex predators of the underworld. If he was here, if he was pregnant with this monster's children. I don't believe you," Julian whispered. "I'm a man. This isn't possible. In our world, Julian, money and science can force miracles," Cassius replied, releasing his jaw and stepping back, his expression unreadable. "Or curses, depending on how you look at it. You were quite eager for the procedure. Before you put a knife in my back." The accusation hung heavy in the air. Julian stared at him, his mind reeling. "A knife in his back? I tried to kill you?" Julian asked, his voice barely audible. Cassius smiled, a dark, humorless expression that didn't reach his eyes. "You certainly tried. You were my best assassin. My right hand. My lover. And on the night we celebrated the success of the implantation, you sold me out to the Russians." Cassius turned away, walking toward the window that overlooked the sprawling, neon-lit city. "The car crash that put you in a coma for 6 months. That was my security detail running you off the road. I should have put a bullet in your skull while you slept." The air in the room grew suffocating. Julian looked down at his stomach again, his hands hovering over the life growing inside him. Twins. He had betrayed this terrifying man, and yet he was alive. Why didn't you? Julian asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. If I'm a traitor, why am I here in silk sheets instead of a grave? Cassius didn't turn around. His reflection in the glass was a specter of loneliness and rage. Because the Vane bloodline is absolute. I do not discard what is mine. And until those children are born, you are nothing more than a vessel. A cage for my legacy. And after? Julian asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. Cassius turned then, his golden eyes burning with a complex mix of hatred and lingering, tortured desire. Pray your memory returns before then, Julian. Because if you can't give me a reason to let you live by the time they take their first breath, you won't take another. The weeks that followed were a blur of gilded captivity. Julian was a prisoner in a golden tower. The penthouse was a fortress, guarded by silent men in suits who looked at him with a mixture of awe and disgust. He was the boss's traitorous lover, the carrier of the airs, a walking contradiction. Julian spent his days pacing the room, trying to force his mind to unlock. He had flashes, sensory fragments. The weight of a sniper rifle. The taste of whiskey on Cassius's tongue. The heat of a body pressed against his in the shower. But the context was missing. He felt the echo of love, but the man in front of him offered only cold indifference. Yet, Cassius's actions betrayed his words. Every night, Cassius returned to the penthouse. He would sit in the armchair, working on documents or cleaning his weapons. He rarely spoke, but he watched. And when the twins were restless, kicking Julian's ribs until he gasped in pain, Cassius would be there. One evening, a storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil inside the penthouse. Julian was curled on the sofa, grimacing as a sharp pain shot through his lower back. Sit up, Cassius commanded, looking up from his tablet. I'm fine, Julian grit out, his stubbornness the only shield he had left. Cassius stood, crossing the room in 3 strides. He didn't ask again. He sat on the edge of the sofa and pulled Julian into a sitting position, spinning him around so his back was to Cassius. Shirt up, Cassius ordered. Cassius, don't. Do not make me tear it off you, Julian. Trembling, Julian lifted the hem of his oversized sweater. He expected cruelty. He expected the rough hands of a gangster. Instead, he felt warm oil being poured onto his skin, followed by large, callous thumbs working into the tense muscles of his lower back. The relief was instantaneous, drawing a broken sigh from Julian's lips. Cassius's hands were strong, masterful, kneading away the pain with a precision that spoke of intimacy. He knew exactly where Julian hurt. He knew Julian's body better than Julian knew it himself. You used to love thunderstorms, Cassius murmured, his voice low, vibrating against Julian's spine. We would sit on the balcony, watch the lightning strike the skyscrapers. You said it was the only time the city was honest about its violence. Julian closed his eyes, leaning back into Cassius's chest without thinking. For a moment, the barrier between them dissolved. I don't remember, Julian whispered, a tear slipping down his cheek. I try, Cassius. I swear I try. But it's just darkness. Cassius's hand slowed, his thumbs tracing the curve of Julian's spine. Maybe it's better you don't. The truth is ugly, Julian. Tell me, Julian pleaded, turning his head to look at Cassius over his shoulder. Their faces were inches apart. If I betrayed you, why does your touch feel like forgiveness? Cassius's eyes darkened, dropping to Julian's lips. The tension was a pulled trigger. This isn't forgiveness, he growled. This is ownership. Before Julian could respond, the elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged open. The atmosphere in the room shattered. Cassius was on his feet instantly, a gun materializing in his hand from a shoulder holster Julian hadn't even noticed. A man stumbled into the room, blood soaking his white shirt. It was Cassius's lieutenant. Boss, we have a problem. The perimeter is breached. It's the Russians. They know he's here. The Russians. The people Julian had supposedly sold Cassius out to. Take him to the safe room. Cassius barked, moving toward the door. No. Julian struggled to stand, clutching his heavy stomach. Cassius, go. Cassius roared, the monster fully surfacing now. If they get to you, they get to my children. Move. The lieutenant grabbed Julian's arm, dragging him toward a hidden panel in the wall. But as the panel slid open, an explosion rocked the building. The windows of the penthouse shattered inward in a shower of diamond dust glass. Men in tactical gear rappelled through the broken windows. Gunfire erupted, deafening and chaotic. Cassius was a blur of violence. He took down 2 men before they hit the floor, his movements efficient and brutal. But there were too many of them. The traitor, one of the attackers shouted, pointing at Julian. Grab the carrier. The lieutenant fell, a bullet catching him in the shoulder. Julian was alone, exposed. A masked man lunged for him, grabbing his hair. Pain exploded in Julian's scalp. He cried out, stumbling. Cassius! Cassius turned, distracted for a split second. That was all it took. A bullet caught Cassius in the leg, sending him crashing to one knee. No. Ideally, Julian should have frozen. He was pregnant, confused, and unarmed. But as he saw Cassius fall, something snapped in Julian's brain. A dam broke. Asterisk the rain. The car. The meeting. He hadn't sold Cassius out. He was a double agent. He was meeting the Russians to kill their leader, to protect Cassius. The crash wasn't Cassius's men. It was the Russians realizing Julian was a mole. Asterisk. The memory hit him with the force of a physical blow. Asterisk he loved Cassius. He had always loved him. Asterisk. Julian's hand moved before his mind caught up. He snatched the fallen lieutenant's gun from the floor. The weight was familiar. It was an extension of his arm. The man holding his hair didn't stand a chance. Julian twisted, jamming the barrel into the man's gut and pulling the trigger. The man crumbled. Julian didn't hesitate. He spun, his center of gravity shifted by the pregnancy, but his aim true. Asterisk bang. Bang. Asterisk 2 shots, 2 headshots on the men advancing on Cassius. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the whistling wind and Cassius's heavy breathing. Cassius looked up, clutching his bleeding leg, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at Julian, standing amidst the glass and blood, heavy with child, holding the smoking gun with the steady hand of a master killer. You remembered, Cassius breathed. Julian dropped the gun, his knees finally giving out as the adrenaline crashed. He fell to the floor, wrapping his arms around his stomach. I didn't betray you, he sobbed, the truth pouring out of him. I went to end them. For us. For the family. Cassius dragged himself across the floor, ignoring his wound. He reached Julian, pulling him into a desperate, blood-stained embrace. He buried his face in Julian's neck, inhaling the scent of rain and survival. I know, Cassius whispered, his voice cracking. I found the recording in your safe house last week. I knew you were innocent, but I was too proud, too afraid that you wouldn't forgive me for the crash to tell you. Julian pulled back, cupping Cassius's face, smearing blood on his cheek. You kept me prisoner. I kept you safe, Cassius corrected, leaning his forehead against Julian's. And I was going to let you go once the babies were born. I thought you would hate me too much to stay. You idiot, Julian laughed, a wet, choked sound. I'm carrying your twins. I killed 3 men to save you. Do you really think I'm going anywhere? Cassius looked at him, the golden eyes softening into something that looked dangerously like love. He placed a large hand over Julian's stomach, where the twins were kicking furiously, reacting to the adrenaline. No, Cassius vowed, pressing a kiss to Julian's forehead, then his lips, a seal of blood and devotion. You're never leaving this room again. Not because you're a prisoner, but because you're the queen. The sirens wailed in the distance, but in the ruined penthouse, amidst the wreckage of their past, the Viper had finally realized that the wolf had never left his side. And that is how the Viper tamed the wolf. Or perhaps, how the wolf finally reminded the Viper who really held the leash. If you enjoyed seeing Julian's memories unlock in a hail of gunfire, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who held you captive to protect you? Or would you have pulled the trigger on him instead? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece, best quality, high-res. 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men, BL, yaoi, man 1. Pregnant male, messy dark hair, wearing oversized beige sweater, holding a smoking pistol, fierce protective expression, tear-streaked face, standing defensively. Man 2. Mafia boss, sharp black undercut, wearing charcoal suit vest with rolled-up sleeves, bleeding from leg, kneeling on floor, looking up at man 1 with awe and obsession. Background is destroyed luxury. Penthouse, shattered glass windows, night city skyline with rain, dramatic blue and orange lighting, cinematic composition, dynamic angle, intricate details.